Joining us now is State Representative Vikki Goodwin, who is now running for Lieutenant Governor. Ms. Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to start. You have some name recognition here in Austin, Texas, where our studio is based, but you are now running for a statewide position. So I want to give you the chance now for our viewers in every corner of this state who maybe don't know who Vikki Goodwin is. Give us a little explanation of who you are and why you're running for Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. I am a state representative from the Austin area. In my fourth term, ran for the first time in 2018. Really, my passion issue is public education. But these days, I think the issue that most people is on their minds is affordability and just the cost of living going up. As a state representative, you know, I've been able to pass some legislation that has been helpful, but I want to have even more impact. And the way to do that is to run statewide for Lieutenant Governor. The reason I chose this race is that I believe in solving problems through policy. And I think that there are some very significant things that we can do that are different from our current leadership.
Yeah, let's pick a couple of these policy stances you have. We can do education, we can do housing affordability. Could you give us a little more detail on what you would like to accomplish if you were elected to this position?
Yeah, I think that we need to fund our schools better. I hear all the time from superintendents to teachers and students themselves explaining why the lack of funding is making a difference. Larger class sizes, not having the resources in the classroom, having to cut programs. I had some high school students reach out about the International Baccalaureate program being cut from their schools in the Leander School District. So there's some districts that are even going to 4-day school weeks and just doing whatever they can to save pennies to the point where it's cutting back on the effectiveness of our education. The STAR testing, high stakes testing, has also been on a lot of people's minds, and we went from having 1 test a year to 3 tests at a time when we were trying to cut back the amount of time spent on testing. So we have a lot to do with our K through 12, but also higher ed. I've been hearing a lot of stories about the chilling effect of some of the laws that we have passed recently. University professors feeling like they can't speak freely in their classrooms. A lot of programs being cut. So there's a lot of work to do around public education, but funding it better is the start. This session we chose to underspend what we could have spent by $4 billion. So that's more money that we could invest, truly invest into our students and our youth, and we know that we'll get the return on that investment. When people are better educated, they make better salaries, and that would address this affordability issue in one way. You know, a lot of people that I talk to around the state have mentioned the Trump tariffs. We won't really have the ability to impact that, but we can impact affordability in other ways. Housing affordability, you mentioned as well, that's something that's near and dear to me since I'm a residential real estate broker. I want people to be able to realize the American dream of owning their own home. These days I hear from a lot of young people, they feel like they may not ever be able to do that. You know, their salaries aren't high enough and the cost of housing is very high. So I had a couple of ideas this session. One, to expand an existing program called Texas Homes for Heroes. It simply provides low interest rate loans and down payment assistance for first responders and teachers. I tried to add social workers to that to give them an incentive, and I also tried to increase the income guidelines so more people would qualify. Unfortunately, we didn't get that passed. And right now, in a recent interview with a builder in South Texas, he was saying that maybe upwards of 50% of their workforce are undocumented, and they're concerned about going onto the work sites, and that's cutting back, slowing down the building process. Slowing down the building process means that housing prices will go up.
Yeah, I've heard that it's slowed down, almost doubling the time it takes to build a standard 2,000 square foot home down there in South Texas. You mentioned you were filing legislation. You've spent 8 years in the Texas House of Representatives. I'm wondering, how do you think your experience will help you against your opponents in the Democratic primary?
I think experience is really critical to try to step into the role of Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor heads the Senate and has immense power in the legislature. Knowing how bills get passed, how the Senate works, how the House works is really important. And I think while my 2 opponents in the Democratic primary have passion about making change in Texas, it's quite a leap to go from not holding office to being really the most powerful person in the state. I've built relationships with other members throughout the years. You know, I've passed legislation with Senator West, for example, on a food resiliency bill to try to address food deserts. I passed legislation with Senator Alvarado in the Houston area, the Natalia Cox Act of Violence Prevention. I passed a law with Senator Zaffarini, who is the Dean of the Senate, drowning prevention. So I've just had such great opportunities to work with other senators and get to know them, their priorities, and I look forward to working with them as Lieutenant Governor.
You ever worked with any Republican senators?
You know what, actually I have. So I passed a bill around mental health with Senator Bob Hall. It was to expand access to a treatment therapy called AccuDetox. Some people call it 5MP. Okay. And I'm not sure if he had a whole lot of knowledge about that beforehand, but I came to an event that he held actually in my district and spoke to him afterwards about, it was around the vulnerabilities of our power grid. And I spoke to him and said, I like some of the things in the documentary that you showed. What are you working on in terms of legislation? And I think from that conversation, he just felt like I was being respectful of him, even though we don't agree on all the issues. There are certainly places where we can find common ground.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to, sort of this experience question. Probably your biggest opponent right now in the Democratic primary is Marcos Velez. He's sort of this outsider candidate is what he's kind of been pegged as. What do you say to those voters who maybe have a distrust for politicians who've been serving for multiple terms? What do you say to them?
Well, it's a tough place to get things done, the Texas legislature, and having somebody step in without any experience in any relationships is really going to be difficult. There's going to be a steep learning curve, and while he wants to make things better for the average Texan, so do I. But I just know how the process works. I know who the players are. I know some of the strategies that are used and could be used against a new incoming lieutenant governor unless you have those alliances to work with you.
Okay. You are a very even-keeled person. I've seen you debate on the House floor, and again, very calm when you're on the back podium. But that's not usually what we see in the Texas House all the way up to our Congress. We see a lot of shouting. We see a lot of hand banging on the podium, people interrupting each other. Do you think your very calm tone will help you in this race, or do you think people want a more outgoing fighter?
Well, if they want someone that's going to be effective in office, then I think it will help me. I think a lot of people I speak to say they like that calmness. I've been able to get things done despite not being incredibly outspoken. I think it's by strategy, understanding how people operate, understanding it's almost the psychology. And I think I have an advantage in terms of just being able to work with people. I've gotten compliments even from Republicans, certainly from Democrats, just in being able to, in my first session, getting some legislation passed.
I want to talk about a poll that was released from the University of Houston earlier this week. And the interesting thing in this poll, it looks at your race in the Lieutenant Governor race. It actually had a matchup with you and the incumbent Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He has a 5-point lead according to this poll over you. But something that was interesting that stuck out to me, you have a net positive approval rating of about 6%. But 58% of the people in this poll didn't know enough about you to form an opinion about you. So you do have the potential to grow your approval rating. But how do you get people excited about Vikki Goodwin who don't know who you are?
It's going to mean a lot of travel, visiting with a lot of people throughout the state. People don't really pay attention to the election until much closer to that time. I've noticed that as we get closer to the primary, for example, people are starting to pay attention to who are the candidates. People are busy with their everyday lives, and so I have had really good opportunities to meet with some of the local elected officials. I serve on the CAPCOG for Central Texas, which is the Council of Government. So I've had opportunities to meet with the city council members, mayors, and I think that's helpful. When it gets closer to election time, they'll start talking to folks in their communities about, right now the current leadership is tying the hands of local elected officials, city councils and mayors and county judges, et cetera. And so I think through work and efforts that I've had saying that I believe in local control, for example, they'll tell their communities what we need is someone that's going to work with us, not against us.
Well, we are right now in an off year for the Texas legislature. We're not in session. It's sort of what we call the interim period, where lawmakers can start investigating these interim charges that are given out by the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. Dan Patrick put out his interim charges either earlier this month or late last month, and there were 5 points. I know he's probably going to release some more, but if you were in the position right now, what sort of interim charges would you want your senators to investigate in the interim?
One of the things that I'm hearing a lot about lately is data centers and the water and energy that they use. So I think that would be interesting. We don't have the ability to know, are we allowing them to be placed in the right places? When they want to locate in a city, the city council may have the ability to say yes or no, but when they go outside city limits into the county, counties have very little land use authority. So is there perhaps something that we could do to give counties more authority about where they're located, rather than after the fact having the communities up in arms because there has been a new data center or 2 or 3? So I think that would be one. I think looking again at our public education, how is our new funding formula working? We changed it this last legislative session. We made it even more complicated, if you can believe that, because our school funding formula is already very complicated. But I went to a conference recently with some superintendents who were talking about how they had to work really hard to make the formula work in their particular school district. So I think looking at ways that we could actually simplify the school funding formula, I would be very interested in that. And then since I serve on the insurance committee, always interested in what are some real solutions to bring down the cost of health insurance, home insurance, car insurance, and provide better coverage for the citizens who are buying that insurance.
This question's more directed for our Travis County viewers, but you, your colleagues, James Tallarico and Gina Hinojosa, are all running for statewide positions, and that means all 3 of you will not be in the Texas House starting in the 2027 legislative session. And all 3 of you really carry some seniority in there. You have some clout, and the Travis County constituents are really kind of losing that clout. I wonder what what you think of this as a new generation of lawmakers will try to step in to replace the 3 of you.
Well, I have every confidence that those who step in to replace us will do great work. Plus, we still have Representative Donna Howard with a lot of seniority and a lot of knowledge, who's staying in the Texas House. Cheryl Cole, Lulu Flores, both representatives also from Travis County with some knowledge base. So I'm not worried. I think my chief of staff is running for my seat. I think she has a good chance at becoming the next representative for House District 47. That's Pooja Sethi, and she's worked for me for 4 years and helped me get legislation passed. So I have a lot of confidence in her. I know there's a lot of candidates running for James and Gina's seats, so we'll see how that turns out, but I have confidence.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add about your race here, who you are? Last word's yours.
Well, I would say that we need a good win for Texas.